The new Sakashima card from Commander Legends is double busted, but I have to admit, I really love it. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. I've got a read-along shirt in case you want some delicious fine luxury cardboard rectangle merch. It's available down below. There should be a link for that. Now, I want to talk about the brand new Sakashima card and all the cards that tie into its history as well. But this is really cool. Sakashima is a really cool character from Magic's history. And on top of that, this card feels really, really strong. So let's start with the card. It's obviously been on the screen the whole time I've been yammering. It's basically Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, all right? 1 blue and 3 for a 3/1 legendary human rogue. You may have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces other abilities. And the other abilities are the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control, and it has partner, which is something that's showing up obviously on a ton of cards in this set, but to me is the least interesting part of the card. But it makes it cooler and stronger overall because you can use it obviously as a singular commander, but why would you when you can pair it up with another commander? So that just enhances its power level. Now, to me, the craziest part is they just tacked on the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. And it's funny to me because the quotations there is just like a shorthand form of telling you rules that apply to legendary permanents in terms of uniqueness don't apply anymore. But there's no way to like not have that be a big sprawling mess of words. So they just go, the legends rule. But whenever I think of quotations, it's like, sure, you love me, mom. You know what I mean? Like I only think of it as sarcastic. So it's funny to me when I see it. But basically all it means is that normally you can only have out one copy of a legendary creature. But when you have Sakashima out, you can have multiple copies of any legendary creature you want out, any legendary permanent that applies to lands, artifacts, whatever. It's not just legendary creatures. Either way, you're allowed to have duplicate copies of the same legend. Now that clearly exists simply to make the first ability function, where basically it's like, hey, Sakashima can copy your other commander, right? Like you can partner him with a commander, put him out, and he can literally be a copy of your commander if you so desire. So that amps up the power level, but I like the fact that they extended it out to all of your permanents. Because if you don't know, there's actually already a card called Mirror Gallery that says that the legend rule doesn't apply. So that basically is everybody not having to worry about the legend rule, right? And the flavor text is cool in that card too. It says, only in mirrors do heroes find their equal. And you can actually see there's a bunch of like reflected copies of the person who's standing there in front. That's a funky concept. But up until now, that's really been the only way to ignore the fact that legendary things can't be copied or you lose one, right? The normal rule is if there's 2 copies of a legendary permanent out, you have to pick one to keep and one that goes to your graveyard. Now, if you go all the way back to the beginning of Magic, the legendary rules were crazier. At the very, very, very beginning, legendary rule meant you could only have 1 copy in your deck. Then it got changed to you can only play the legendary creature if somebody doesn't already have it out. So basically, like not even on your side, the way it works now is we could each have a copy of Sakashima out. But in the old days, it would basically be like, if I play my Sakashima, you can't play yours. That was the old legend rule, which is pretty crazy. The way they do it now, where we can each have a copy and you get to pick one to keep, is fine. You know what I mean? It may be a little bit weird from a flavor perspective, but it works. So I like that they chose to expand this, ignore the legendary aspect across all of your permanents, but only your side. So your opponent doesn't benefit from that. That is a nice little include. Now, Sakashima is an absolutely amazing character. We're seeing him in an earlier part of his journey. We previously got a card for him from the original Kamigawa block, but we'll talk about that after we go over a little bit about Sakashima. This is him on his journey to becoming essentially a master of changing into anybody that he wants to change into. Now, in this incarnation, he's only able to copy people on your side, which is one of the reasons it seems to me this is earlier in his journey. But he's a fascinating character. Essentially, Sakashima was an orphan originally, just left at an orphanage when he was still a baby. And around the age of 5 is when he first got a little taste of what it would be like to pretend to be someone else. He kind of noticed that all 5-year-olds, give or take, looked the same, whether they were boys or girls. So he basically just went ahead, muddied up his face a little, mussed his hair up, and was able to make himself look like this other girl at the orphanage. He ended up getting an extra serving of food as a result. She claimed that she hadn't been fed, which was the truth, but the staff didn't believe her because he had effectively impersonated that child. So that kid went to bed without food, and Sakashima got extra food, right? So this was the first time that he used his abilities, and I mean, obviously in a very minor way, but still, the rewards from using those abilities, right? And he basically grew up with nothing. As he got like progressively older, he started to realize the future that was waiting for him, and he considered it to be mediocre. He didn't want to just grow up and settle down in a random little village and marry someone and crank out a bunch of kids. That wasn't what he was looking for in life. He basically wanted his name to be remembered. And so he set out to find something more in his life. And he started to impersonate different people, right? He would pretend to belong to different groups to see if he could gain entry into their little hideouts or whatever it was. Basically, he went to all these different parts of society and managed to blend in to different degrees. But up until this point, he's really just doing it in the normal way, right? The same way that he pretended to be the little girl by dirt and whatever and just using his brain. He basically would just go and get the clothing that, okay, am I going to be a nobleman? I'll go put on nobleman's clothing, learn how they act and everything like that, put on whatever makeup is appropriate for how I should look, like those sort of things. Something anybody could do, right? At this point, he's essentially just like a vagabond actor almost, but also he's a rogue. He's using people to get by as well. He's doing this for his own amusement, his own game, and it progressively pushes him to get like more daring, right? And remember, he wants to make a name for himself. Being remembered is important to him. So he ends up actually infiltrating this group of students serving under a very powerful wizard. And he goes to present this wizard with like these scrolls, and the wizard essentially just goes, I know who you are. Like, I can tell you're not my student, right? It was very, very obvious, but the wizard was very playful about it. It wasn't like who are you? It's like, come on, buddy, I see you. And at that moment, instantaneously, Sakashima fell to his knees in front of the wizard and begged him to help him improve his craft, right? Because up until then, nobody had really seen through what he was doing, and this wizard, just like that. So the wizard went ahead and taught him how to basically blank his mind entirely and cause his entire personality magically to be subsumed so that he could fully engage in the personality and the mindset of the person that he was trying to be, right? So this takes him from the level of just being able to impersonate regular, like you can make a soldier, a generic nobleman or whatever. This is the difference between doing that and being able to impersonate a specific individual. He can inhabit every aspect of them, and magically he can also tap in to the abilities that those people have as well, and becoming essentially indistinguishable from them, aside from if he makes conversational mistakes, right? He can say something that's not true, that's out of character, and someone might catch on to him. But what he realized is, as he did this more and more, that people really just wanted to be fooled. Or maybe not so much wanted to be fooled, that was somewhat of his mindset, but people would believe appearances and just go along with whatever was happening. So he would start to impersonate like higher level individuals, right? And he's taking over as a king, or he's taking over this particular monastery as a high level monk, just for a brief period of time, just impersonating the individual. But all of a sudden, this monk, who normally doesn't care about worldly goods, is demanding 20% of the monastery's entire harvest that year. And they just hand it to him because he's their leader and they just go along with it. So we found that more and more people would just go along with it. And as a result, he almost wanted to be caught. So he would start to intentionally make these different mistakes and people wouldn't end up noticing. He even started to go around as an actual spirit. He would masquerade as a kami, right? Because Kamigawa has the regular world and the spirit world. And he would pretend to be a spirit and wander around in monasteries thinking he was going to get caught. And the monks would all bow to him like he was an honored spirit. So he became incredibly adept over time at just becoming better and better at copying any different individual. And at a certain point, he uses it to find out his own name, because for the longest time, he only knew the Sakashima part of his name. He actually had to go and quest and find census records for where and when he was born to find his full name. And he actually bears this tiny little charm that was tied to the bundle. When he was an orphan, dropped off as a baby, he had this charm tied to the bundle, and he carries that around as a reminder of his identity. And he's gotten so powerful, not at this point in the journey. At this point, he's still using masks and other things. He used the masks originally as an actual implement to change his persona magically. And after a while, when he gets to his like ultimate version, he no longer requires the masks. At that point, it's just more of a ritual and a reminder and a focus, if that makes sense. So that leads to Sakashima the impostor, where he's at his like full level of power, right? So this is 2 blue for a 2 blue and 2, I should say, for a 3/1 human rogue again. So power and toughness remain the same. This one can copy any creature though. As Sakashima the impostor comes into play, you may choose a creature in play. If you do, Sakashima comes into play as a copy of that creature, except its name is still Sakashima the impostor. It's still legendary, and it gains 2 blue and 2. Return Sakashima the impostor to its owner's hand at end of turn. So this is Sakashima at like his most powerful, essentially. At this point, he is well known. He retains his own name. He can copy any legendary creature, but because he has his own name, there's no conflict with the legendary rule. So he's already capable of that without having the legend rule doesn't apply added to this card. So he's at the final step of the journey that we've seen so far, where he's now able to copy anyone. His ultimate goal at this point is honestly to travel to the spirit world and actually go as a kami and convince them that he is one of them. So that is, maybe we'll see a card for that as the next step. But I definitely enjoy the journey between the two, where you can tell like it's earlier in his journey with the earlier one. Even with the artwork, it just feels like he's got more ornate robes in the final imposter version, and the crazy chain things that are flying off of him look like they have more detail and more to them. And on the previous art, they were kind of not as like fleshed out, I suppose. I don't know if I'm just completely off base with that, to be real, but it appears to me that that's the previous Sakashima. And at this point, we're seeing the old Sakashima being the fully brought to fruition version. And Sakashima's such a legendary individual that he actually has multiple students studying under. Actually, one of them is literally called Sakashima Student. It's a ninja card, and it's 2 blue and 2 for a 0/0. And that reminds me, I wanted to talk about that. Sakashima is interesting because he's a 3/1, where a lot of creatures that take on other creature types and abilities and become copies tend to be 0/0s, especially shapeshifters. But either way, this is a 0/0, but Sakashima always has that 3/1, which is an exceptional level of power for a regular everyday human, because that's what he is at the beginning. He makes himself more, goes on a journey to learn his name and everything, but ultimately, he's just a regular person. So Sakashima Student is one of those funky ninjutsu cards where when you're attacking, if you have a creature that's not blocked, you can put that creature back into your hand, ninjutsu this guy out, and he's in place of it attacking now. It's a really funky mechanic. It is a little bit weird to have ninjas in Magic, I will admit. When they brought them out in Kamigawa, I was like, all right, it feels a little bit hokey, kind of summoning up ninjas, but at the same time, you want to summon ninjas, can't really fault you for that. And this one's cool, because it's like, you get to ninja in a clone. So it's just basically like, boom, put it out. It's a copy of anything that's already on the board. I dig that. And the artwork is cool too, with him perched up there on top of a temple with his little like weird smiley face kind of frog mask I dig that, right? So that's a testament to Sakashima's power. But what is a real testament to how powerful he is as someone who can change himself into anything is the fact that even shapeshifters want to study under him. And that's another new card that we're just seeing in Commander Legends, and that's Sakashima's protege. And Sakashima's protege is 2 blue and 4 for a 3/1 flash with Cascade. And on top of having Cascade, which is pretty good on a 6-cast spell, right? You're gonna get something that costs 5 or less off the top of your deck, not too shabby. But anyways, when Sakashima's protege comes into play, if you want it to, you can have it come into play as a copy of any permanent that entered the battlefield this turn. So in some ways, Sakashima's protege is more powerful than Sakashima, right? Sakashima can, change forms, whatever, whenever you feel like it, depending. The one can be bounced back to your hand, all that. And the protege can only be set the turn it comes into play. However, it can turn into non-creature permanents, which Sakashima can't because it's a genuine shapeshifter. But think about a being that's very nature is being a shapeshifter and being so in awe of a human that's learned to take on the shape and guise of any being. Like, that is an amazing level of fame. Sakashima has very clearly achieved his goal to the point where even in the shapeshifter world, they come along and are serving under him and learning from him. And one of the things I like about that as well is what ties in here is in the artwork, Sakashima's protege is turning into one of the moonfolk, right? And the moonfolk live in these sky palaces and they basically look down on everybody else. They're like, we're way better than you. We have much better magic. We live in floating cities. We're smarter. They're just essentially massively elitist, right? And Sakashima spent time amongst them and talked about how transcendent it felt and how basically after a while of being there, it totally warped his perspective because you're flying up above them and everything looks like ants. And it talked about how afterwards he basically turned himself into a farmer and spent a bunch of time just being a humble farmer to help bring his ego back down to a regular level. And I really like the idea of going into other existences to that degree where it affects you, where you can have these massive experiences where being somebody else gives you a completely different perspective on the world. That's really cool. And the idea of Sakashima relaying this concept to a shapeshifter, and then that shapeshifter choosing to go and take the same journey, this is what my master did. I'm going to go and gain some level of enlightenment from taking that same journey. I love it. That's really cool to me, honestly. The whole concept of Sakashima starting out as an orphan and obviously for his own self-serving gain, but the quest that he went on to learn his own name and find out that he's Kenshi Sakashima and everything else that he did, and ultimately his quest to go to the Kami spirit realm just to see if he can, is cool. But all underneath it, it feels like he's broken inside. He's never made genuine connections with people, right? They may be short-lived, but he's only making those connections as someone else, never as Sakashima. And he's constantly driven to keep doing what he's doing. So underlying it all, it feels like he's still broken inside from being abandoned as a child. And so to me, the fact that the card feels broken strong and underneath the character feels broken and is an engaging character totally made it feel like it was worth making a video talking about him. But let me know what you think. And also, let me know who you would partner up with Sakashima. Because I wondered that when I saw the partner. I'm like, who would be the best partner to use with Sakashima? So let me know if you play Commander, you got an idea, then go ahead, put that down in the comments below. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe. That's all fantastic for the channel. Sharing the videos around, also fantastic for the channel. And if you love what I'm doing and want to help me with it, then jump on my Patreon. It's the best way to support what I do. So thanks for coming by, everybody. I appreciate very much getting to spend time hanging out and chatting about Magic. I will see you guys tomorrow.